Amazing Women Speak podcast, inspiring and motivating every Black woman to own, honor, and execute her amazing, individually and collectively, as it was established at birth.
I'm Crystal L. Gunn, founder of the Amazing Woman Network and host of Amazing Women Speak. And so I thank you in advance for sharing this with your friends so you all can join in on this awesome conversation. And so there's so much going on in the world today, and we're hearing more and more talk about self-care and healing and how vital it is. And so it's taking care of your soul. So let's get into today's topic of soul alignments. Michele, welcome again. And thank you for saying yes to Amazing Women Speak. And let's get this conversation started.
Good evening. Once again, it is an honor and a privilege to be in this space where we get another opportunity to have some dynamic conversation with some amazing women, where we unpack all of the ways in which we've been socialized to not live out of our amazing. Excited for yet another conversation. Facebook, as you know, I call this the fastest hour of your day. Women, this is a conversation you need to be paying attention to because alignment is critical for direction. And so we want to talk about soul alignment and how we're making those connections in ways that is going to allow us, without apology, to live into the gift of being amazing that God has birthed each and every one of us with. So let's get into it. Let's meet our guest and we will get into this conversation. I invite you in to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. It's a blessing. My name is Naila Mueed, and I am a transformational consultant, coach, and artistpreneur. And I help facilitate soul alignment and life fulfillment through navigating 8 seed topics. And so it is my pleasure to be with you this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are, and to have a discussion about soul alignment. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So we launched deep, right? We've only got 50 minutes, and this is a conversation that women need to be a part of. So before we can talk about being in alignment, let's talk about not being in alignment. And so Naila, when did you recognize, right? Like I think about my vehicle, right? And when it is in need of an alignment, I think I can be going in the right direction, take my hands off the wheel, and automatically my car is going to drift in one direction or another. But as long as I'm holding tight, I believe I'm going in the right direction, right? It's not until the hands come off the wheel that I understand that something is off and I'm in need of an alignment. When did you discover what was happening in your life around you when you recognized that you were not in alignment?
For me, the big part came when I was pregnant with my first child, and this is some years back. My eldest is 26 now. And so being pregnant, it was like I needed a foundation to really live from that was absolute, that I was just able to offer to someone else and to rear them in. And so for me, that was when I took a soul assessment and said, okay, things are not in a way that I feel good. And I didn't feel inspired offering to someone that I was now going to have the responsibility of rearing. And that's when I was like, we got to get this together. I need to have a foundation and things that are going to make sense. Not where I have to justify, A plus D will get us to Z. No, it needed to really roll out and make sense. So for me, that moment in my life was becoming pregnant.
Interesting, right? Like being the givers of life and recognizing going down our own path, so many different things can distract us. And we're believing that we're doing the right things. So in that moment, to do the soul check, to recognize that the responsibility that's coming next is so powerful, so important, life-changing, that you had to do that check, right? So before you even got there, and right, like tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and how it connected to your assignment, to you digging into understanding that you had to go deeper, you had to do this self-check before you became a mother.
And so And I'm going to say my journey, which, whether it is my spiritual journey or my educational journey and my professional journey, which all combine into one, it has had many iterations or pivots, if you will. And so just becoming pregnant was that first pivot in my life, where before, and I would say not necessarily the first, because my educational pivot, when I was growing up, there really wasn't anything I wanted out of life, and my life reflected that. It reflected that I didn't have any aspirations or ambitions or a sense of, oh, I have something to give to the world. And so once I got pregnant, I would happen to be in college and I was going after psychology. And when I got pregnant, it was like, you know what? I need a firm grounding in God, which was really the bottom line. And so before that, it was really about trying to be successful in the world, but success from a place of I had to make something up about myself rather than reveal something within myself. Right. So really beginning to get to the place of, I don't feel like I have something that I want to give to my child at this moment. I need to go back to the beginning. I need to sit down and really reveal within myself something that is worth giving. And right now where I'm sitting is very clear. When I started this process, I went on just a deep journey, and I'm sure that unfold in our conversation. But this journey led me through many different paths and finally coming to rest in where I am now. And so moving through that is like I changed my geographical location. I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I now live in Santa Monica, California, and I've lived here since 2004. And so my journey, once I got to California, opened up a whole nother part of my evolution, if you will. And so what really set me on that path was, as I said, that desire to give something, to be a contribution to this other life that I now had responsibility for. And that question of what do I have to give to them that I really believe in, so really resting in that. And that's really what contributes to everything that I do.
Right, which is powerful that you connected that in that moment. Most of us stumble, most of us are getting up from a fall to recognize that we need to do some soul alignment. For that intentionality, for you to recognize even geography wasn't serving you, is so powerful. Tell us about the intentionality.
So to get to the intentionality, I'll go back like in my childhood. I'm the fifth of 7 children, right? And so I often say, in order to be poor, we would have had to have some money, being a family of 9. And so I know poverty growing up in a very deep level, right? And in my youth, I struggled with anxiety, though I didn't know it. That's something I'm going to say over the last 10 years or so, I've come to really realize like, oh, I had anxiety.
Right.
I sucked my thumb till I was 18 years old, just moving through a lot of, I was reared by my dad as a single dad from the time I was 8 to 18. And then I moved out of the house at 18 and moved in with my mother for like a year. And then I've been on my own ever since I was 19 years old. And so growing up in a situation with so many siblings, with so much poverty, some of the benefits were being able to be independent, right? But on the other side was a sense of not necessarily feeling cared for, right? And not necessarily having had those individual conversations about life that I needed for my life. We had political conversations, we had religious conversations, we knew how to have a heated debate. I'm well versed in all of those things as a child, right? And so knowing anything about relationships, No, knowing anything about how to have a partnership or even how to navigate my own professional terrain. That was non-existent for me. And so I graduated a fifth year senior, and a fifth year senior with a 1.7 GPA. And so really moving through, I got a job at this counseling office at the services in a Seattle housing project. And getting that job made me realize, oh, there's something I wanted to do, because I watched them counseling people and really helping their lives. And I was like, oh, this is has meaning. I want to be able to be a therapist. I want to counsel people and help them, have more emotional, mental stability. And so that began my journey into education. And I went through that process. I didn't have anyone to walk me through that either. I walked myself through, found out how to apply. And each step of the way, I learned more and more about that process. So then I got pregnant while I was in college. And there I was like, well, I'm not stopping. I'm going to continue going to school. However, that interrupted just being on an educational professional journey, and it moved forward into a spiritual journey. And it actually changed my education as well. But at that point, when I came to realize, okay, my life still, while it has a goal or has some motivation, it really doesn't have inspiration. It really doesn't have something that I totally believe in. It just has something that I'm making up, that I'm justified, and it's going to be that thought of, well, I have to justify it, I have to explain it, and didn't really sit in it from a place of knowing, and it didn't really have life of its own. So I had to keep attending to it, which is one of those things that I point people to. It's like, if it really needs your constant and I'm going to say painful dedication in order for it to survive, that's how you're making it up, rather than it's being given to you from inspiration. So for me, it was really the fact that everything that was sitting in front of me, even though it was something I was motivated to, it didn't have any life on its own. And there really wasn't any energy that was feeding that in a circular pattern. So there wasn't much coming back to me, but I had to just keep giving out, which, as a Black woman, we know well about being burnt out, by all the things that we, tune into. And so I hope I'm answering the question that you asked,
Absolutely.
Just so feeding into that, how I knew when it was time that I had to go within, when I spent more days being burnt out and not feeling like I was being given to or being fed or poured into, and and I'm gonna say it over and over again, and coming to that space where I don't want this for a child, and how am I gonna bring a child in? I have nothing left to give, and so it's really a matter of, I don't want to be one more person who's bringing a child into this world and going to keep it going with the status quo, and just refusing to operate from that place. So that's a little bit about, how, my situation drove me to this place, and really being able to recognize, when I'm in a moment, even now, if I get too caught up in the world, I know that's happening by how I feel. If I feel drained, then I know, oh, I'm attending to the world way too much right now, instead of to my soul,
So one of our listeners put a statement that I want to read, and I want you to share what resonates, what comes up, what bubbles up for you around this statement. Kristen Edwards says, I think we need to talk more about the long-lasting wounds growing up in poverty creates. Even when we get out, we still operate in survival mode.
Definitely.
What bubbles up for you?
Honestly, what bubbles up, healing trauma, and how important it is to heal trauma and to move from a place that, once you've identified your trauma, you acknowledge it, you identify it, that's still not enough. You're going to need to be able to get some tools to be able to come up out of it, right? And from 0 to 7, all of that is coming in at those ages. Those are known as the programming years, and that's across a few different modalities that we can look into. But from 0 to 7, you experience a whole lot of stuff. And so it's going to be important for people to really be able to go in and assess that. For me, assessments are critical for everything in life, whether you're assessing your own mental, emotional states, whether you're assessing your family's finances or your business. Assessment is going to be key in order for you to know where to go from there. And so, as they say, yes, we need to go back and address those issues that come out of childhood poverty. Yes, that's going to be critical to know. First of all, everyone didn't experience it the same way. Two people could, and siblings especially, could be going through the exact same thing, but having a total different experience of it, where one, they're experiencing something as trauma, and the other, it's a lesson, and when people ask me, trauma is simply an experience that you didn't gain the lessons out of necessarily, and that you just keep reliving and reliving. But once you gain the lessons out of it and you're able to grow from the experience, it's no longer traumatizing to you. So definitely, wow. I love that question or that statement that was put into the comments, that we definitely need to make sense of the experience that comes from growing up in poverty.
Can you achieve soul alignment in survival mode?
So, no. The quick and easy answer is, and it's not that you can't achieve it in survival mode. Those two things are antithetical, right? They do not go together. And so soul alignment will automatically not have you in survival mode any longer, right? Because you're in alignment with your soul, you're thriving at that stage, right? And in order to actually recognize and go into your soul, there's something that takes you out of this, just the day-to-day grind of, I'm just trying to be here, I'm just trying to get through. That's not a soul alignment conversation. Right? That is a survival conversation. And I love all your questions. They're just right there. I have a workshop I do, Surviving to Thriving. And all of this is so critical to really moving our communities forward, to moving first the individuals and then therefore the community coming out of survival mode. And the only thing that is going to do that is, first of all, us acknowledging that we are a soul rather than these bodies, right? Because when we're identified as these bodies, that's what has us in survival mode, because we think this is what we are, this organic vehicle that has our soul moving through this earth plane, but that's not who we are, right? And so, no, once you recognize that, one, you have a soul, and then two, getting aligned with the calling of your soul, that automatically will take you out of survival mode.
All right, so let's make the transition. Of course, I see the leaning in.
I want you to go back to when you talked about moving to California, right? And I want you to speak on that a little bit, because so often, and the destination for so many of us is Atlanta, right? I need to go to Atlanta because that. What's the difference between I need to relocate because I think when I get there, my problems are going to be solved, versus I need to solve my problems, and with that, as a result of that, I relocate?
I think the way you phrase those questions, they're one and the same, just two different ways of asking the same question. If I think relocating is the answer to a problem, it doesn't matter how I frame it. Wherever you go, you find yourself, right? And so for me, that call, I was called to move, right? And in that moving, there were a few things that I wanted to create. And it's funny you mentioned Atlanta. Atlanta's on is keeps coming up for me. So that may be my next move, after having been here so long. It is, so stay tuned. There might be, some news by the end of the year. And it's like, guess what? But in that, coming to Los Angeles area. So growing up, Seattle never quite resonated with me. It felt like I was put somewhere out of, some ambiguous decision, even though I know everything has a purpose. So, but it never clicked with me. And so I'm going to say when I turned around 15, there was something in me who said, we have to get out of here. So I started looking at different places to move around the country. And I looked at Philadelphia, I looked at San Diego. Los Angeles came up quite a few times. And I had judgments. I was like, I would never live in Los Angeles. There's so much gang activity. There's so many of, the stereotypical things that I saw on TV. There's Hollywood, it's fake. It's not for me. But it kept coming up. So when I was at the University of Washington, one of my professors recommended a graduate school in Southern California. And I was like, okay, I'll look. And on the other side, I was on my spiritual journey, and I was looking for a more diverse spiritual community with progressive thought. And someone recommended Spiritual Center, Agape. And I said, okay, I'm gonna look that up. Lo and behold, I went down for a visit, went to an interview, and went to Agape. And I was like, whew, I'm home. This is resin, this is me. And so I wasn't moving to address a problem or to run away from a problem or thinking it would solve any problem that I had in Seattle. I had a good life, a good foundation in Seattle. My whole family still lives there, so I go back often. What for me, it just wasn't a soul alignment, and I could feel within my soul there was something else. And as I'm going to say, God presented to me this other place that it had been presented for a while, and I was just judging. I was listening from my ego voice, right? And so I wasn't listening to what was already calling from within my soul, because I had an idea about what I wanted it to look like or what I thought it should. And lo and behold, I wish I had moved here sooner, because I would have been reared in a different way for myself. There's an entrepreneur spirit here. There's a creative aspect here. The weather, the food, the international, just all of it moves so well with me. Had I listened earlier, I would have been much further along in my unfoldment. So taking your question of, moving and changing geography as a way of escaping problems. No, if that's the reason you're moving, you're just going to find the same problems with a different skin. You know what I mean? There's just going to be cloaked in a different face, a different mask, but same problems. So,
So I want to talk about, let's shift to how we begin to identify for women some strategies, right? So we talked about the survival mode that many Black women find themselves in for one reason or another, right? Like, not about shame or blame. It's the setup, right? Like, it's the setup. Nothing around the ways in which we need to access resources were designed for us, right? So we're constantly fighting, constantly in survival mode. How do I find my soul's purpose?
So with everything, it starts with sitting down and telling the truth about where you are right now, right? And really taking stock. All right, how is my life going? And for me, I have people look at 5 different aspects of life. How is my spirituality? How is my creativity? How are my relationships? How are my finances? How is my health? Right? And really taking stock in those 5 different areas will let us know, okay, this is how life is going. So then once you've taken stock, it's time to look at, what am I feeding and what am I not feeding that has been being called to be fed? right? And that's how in my situation, I was able to look and say, you know what, this keeps getting presented to me. Maybe I need to listen here. And that's going to be the good and the bad of it, right? As I know in popular culture, as it says, if you keep having the same relationship with different people, you need to look at the common denominator. It's yourself, right? So when we're finding ourselves having these experiences that we keep complaining about, let's say it's our health, and it's like, oh, I'm always tired, because energy is a product of health, so if we find ourselves always tired or lacking focus, it's like, what are you feeding yourself that you expect to have energy? And it can't be like coffee or sweets or those things that are actually zapping your energy. And so that is really where we need to start, is assessing those 5 areas of our life, taking stock, and then look at, what am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? What am I not saying yes to, right? And that keeps calling. And those are going to be different things, because the things we are saying yes to that may be draining us and keeping us out of soul alignment. Some of those things are going to be the relationships that we keep attending to that don't feed us from a place of inspiration, right? Those relationships that may be stroking our egos, but aren't really a fulfillment of our soul. So that is where I would say we start. But it's a thing that has many layers, if you will. But anyone who is just starting the process is really going to start with some assessment of, how are these 5 areas of my life going? What am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to?
Right. And being able to break away from fear, right? Like that'll trap you and hold you in that same space. And so, Mary, I inspire Evans, who I absolutely love and adore.
Absolutely.
Dropped in, connecting into what you were talking about around the need to move, right? Like that calling. She said, I relocated not to solve my problems, but to find peace and healing. I realized that solitude was needed away from all familiar surroundings. God needed all of my attention. Fear would have caused her to have sat in the space that she already was, producing, right? When you recognize that there's something greater, something that you have to break away from that fear.
Yes.
Not many people can do that, right? Like we hold on to the familiar, right? Like it's better to, what do they say, dance with the devil you know than the one that you don't, right? Like that. And so we will sit in misery because it's familiar instead of recognizing.
Yeah. I don't want to cut you off.
No, come on in.
That fear topic is such a big one and pervades our society, because it is the dominant way that mainstream moves people, right? People are often moved by fear in every aspect of their life, rather than being moved by love or by inspiration. And so that idea of breaking away from fear, you really have to change your life. You really have to be dedicated to doing some things totally different than the way you've been doing them. Because fear is just a natural byproduct of tuning into anything in our society, whether it's the commercials pumping you fear, if you don't do this, you're going to end up here. But if you do this other thing, there are going to be these, possibilities of negative consequences that can come in. Wherever you look, most people rear their children from a place of fear, right? From
Absolutely.
A place, where they disguise it with the name discipline, but that's not, a lot of what people are doing is not disciplining, it's teaching control and fear, right? So I love that. You're definitely going to have to break away from leading your life from fear. And that's a mighty task. It's easily said, but it's a challenge when you really get into it,
Absolutely.
This is a juicy conversation that it goes much deeper than what we're saying. It definitely does.
Full ownership, owning what's happening in your life. People say, oh, I want to change. I want to do something different. My life needs to be different. Yep. How much is full ownership? You taking total responsibility. How much, what part or how much of that plays in you being successful in your soul alignment?
Each part is 100%, right? It's from that holistic view. And so every part is critical. You can't have soul alignment without any of these keys, right? Fear is outside of soul alignment, right? If you're having ownership of your life, it comes with, let's say, recognizing, first of all, that you create your reality by the thoughts that you choose. Ownership is recognizing that if I say yes to a certain thought, it's going to have certain impact in my life. If I'm saying yes to certain relationships, that's going to have an impact in my life. So ownership is 100%. You cannot have soul alignment if you don't recognize that you are a powerful being that creates out of what you are thinking and then therefore saying and doing. But first, it's our thoughts. What are you thinking about yourself? If you're thinking you're inconsequential in how your circumstances are turning out, that's moving from a different place that is not soul alignment, right? So ownership, and that rests in a universal law, cause and effect, vibration, things that we don't speak often enough in our community about. The universal law of consequence, where when I plug in a light, a cord into a light socket, lights come on. It's the same with us. When I plug into who I am, the light of my being comes on, right? It's natural. It's a natural law. And if I disconnect from source, if I disconnect from my soul, the lights are low, and I'm walking in the darkness. And so ownership of who I am, ownership of how I think, ownership of what I'm actually engaging in, ownership of I have a say in how this turns out.
Right.
100% crucial.
Right.
So Michele, before you lift up Kristen's comment, because I need you to lift that up, I do want to ask, because we talk about fear all of the time, right? And you said fear is outside of soul alignment. What does fear look like? And the reason that I ask is because it shows up in different masks. How do they recognize it in order to overcome it?
So remember, these are two different conversations. So the conversation about soul alignment is over here. The conversation about fear is over here. So that's a different conversation than soul alignment. And so when we're talking about fear, when we're speaking about fear, what we're speaking about is the decision to live disconnected, the decision to not acknowledge that I have a say in how this turns out. And so when we're looking from a fearful stance, we're looking from, I'm running the ego agenda that I'm attached to, and I have not yet invested in understanding what that ego agenda is in order to not have it run my life. Because the things that are fearful is I'm not going to get what I want, right? Or someone's going to take advantage of me, you know what I mean? Or things are not going to turn out in the way that I have deemed they should turn out. And so those conversations, I mean, when you think about what is fear, those conversations involve a lack of connection to a higher purpose, to a higher calling, and to soul alignment, right? So they are two different conversations. Yes, it's necessary if you find yourself in a deep place of fear, like I said, to really get in there, do that assessment on what is going on and what's causing those fears. And sometimes some people are going to say, well, it's a chemical imbalance, where I just find myself fearful. But there's going to be some driving forces in that too. And it's all going to be individual. We all have our own filter that our ego puts over. So we all have our own special fears that aren't other people's fears, right? Whether it's somebody has a fear of speaking in public, somebody has a fear of getting a relationship, somebody has a fear that their finances are going to fail. It's all a personal journey, right? But it is I'm going to say I'm without judgment, that it is a beginning process, that you have to take that veil of fear off in order to go into soul alignment.
Yeah, so there are a couple of comments. We're always excited when folks are using the voice, powerful women are using the voice in the chat. Some of them are statements, and I definitely want to make sure that those get in. And then the impact that you're having just in this conversation, we definitely want to lift that up. We are so very grateful for the ways in which you are sharing. People are moved, people are hearing, people are responding. And so Mary says, my fear of staying the same outweighed my fear with the possibilities that could be on the other side, right? Like acknowledging the fear and doing it anyway, right? Recognizing the importance of what this currently is, this current situation is not going to work. And I'm going to move anyway, right? Like you said, if I go, there's a part of me that's going to go with me. And I just might discover the thing that's been missing, the thing that will allow me to begin to put my soul in alignment if, right? And one of the things we always talk about, Naila, is our relationship with our higher power, our relationship with God, to be able to stand on our faith, right? And be unshakable in that. And in that space, right? Like we will move anyway. We will move anyway. We will trust that step. So Mary, again, I love you. Thank you for sharing, using your voice. Phoenix lifts up that's one of my daily purposes, is for herself and for others, moving out of positivity and love. She refuses to operate in fear. She's going to allow positivity and love to drive her. We've been cultured out of fear for generations, right? Like there is some generational work that has to happen as we continue to grow. And here's impact, and we thank you. Christian says, OMG, this is speaking directly in my current situation. I've put off relocating. Feels like I'm fighting the wind. Right? When you think about that, the force of wind and your ability to continue to walk into it and have something push against you all the way, or to simply turn around and give in it and allow it to push you in the direction that you need to be going. We hope, Christian, part of this conversation is going to continue to challenge you to think that the ground that's holding your feet right now may not be the ground that's been designed, that God is calling you to. So we thank you for being open to this part of the conversation, and hope you sit in it enough that the next step is the right step that's been ordained by God, and stop fighting the wind and turn into it and allow it to direct you where you need to go.
Yes.
Fear is like a border patrol with one job: to keep you safe inside the walls of your comfort zone. I love that, right? Like we are willing to be just in discomfort because it's familiar, because we're moving out of fear. And that's never going to get us where we need to be. So if I was coming to you because I need coaching, because I recognize that my soul is not in alignment, that I'm not even fully sure what my soul's purpose is, what is this journey of coaching with you going to look like?
Well, first of all, it's going to be unique to each individual, right? And so it's going to look like an assessment process. It's going to look like sitting down and getting honest. Like in that one of those last examples you read, where the person's saying, they are fearful of making the same decisions, or of not being able to move into their next iteration of themselves, is about telling the truth about why you've been where you are, right? Telling the truth about what you're getting out of staying within something that you no longer feel benefits you, right? And it's going to be able to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses, or your challenges, if you will. Going to recognize those things, your addictions. There's a lot of assessment that happens, and then recognizing how to put in place supports that you may need, how to put in place new skills that you need to develop. what is this learning that needs to happen? Because if you were able to just, oh, okay, I see it, I changed my mind, that would have happened already, right? And so it's really an in-depth process of looking at, where am I? Why am I here? What has it been giving me up to this point? And now I recognize I want to be somewhere else. What do I need to develop in order to get to this new place? Right. And for me, I don't believe in just coaching somebody for the lifetime. I put people on a 6 to 12 month plan. It's like, I don't want you to need me after 12 months. Right. And so it's really about developing goals and objectives that are going to lead you, if you do it. Because some people are like, I'm ready, but they're not ready. And you tune in the next week and they haven't done anything on the plan. It's like, okay, maybe you're not ready to change, and you just needed to know change is possible once you get ready. So for me, it's really about that assessment, developing goals and objectives, putting on a lesson plan for you in order to move into, your process of soul alignment. And that's not to say soul alignment is going to happen within 1 year. You're just going to be put on your journey where you have a clear path to, okay, hold on, I know where I'm going. I have a deeper understanding of who I am and of what I'm coming up out of and what's necessary for me to go deeper in. And it's like, once that an initial year happens, I like for people to get on a different plan where it's quarterly, because after 1 year, if you still need weekly sessions, it's like we need to reassess and look at, okay, what haven't I really been doing and applying in my lesson plan, my individualized lesson plan. So that's what it looks like with the process. And everybody's at different stages. So there's no judgment in whether or not in 12 months, if you did not fulfill your unique lesson plan. And it's not something I come up with. It's something we work together to do. And some people are like, well, my life, if you have several young children, your lesson plan is going to be a little different than someone who's single, right? And it's going to take a little different time because you have different obligations to meet. And so 12 months is, I'm going to say, the general process. But for some people, that's not realistic. So it's individualized, and it really, everybody starts with an assessment, every single person.
That's powerful. Important to know. How can folks reach you?
Or you can reach me on Instagram at Divine Variations. That's Divine, Divine, Variations, Variations, at Divine Variations on the Instagram, Linktree, and Naila Mueed on LinkedIn. And then on the Linktree, you'll find access to my YouTube, everything else. My website where you can schedule consultation. So find me on IG, which then has my Linktree on it.
Awesome. Very powerful conversation. So again, very grateful to you for sharing your voice in this way. So many of us as Black women are struggling to find our soul's purpose. And before we can even talk about alignment, right? Like, purpose is a conversation that we have to have. And twice you mentioned, right? Like the need to be honest with self, yes, which is so difficult to do and so sad when you think about, right? That at the end of the day, that life is on your shoulders so to the degree that you're willing to lie to yourself. Even if the revealing of truth could move you out of the space you're in. Mm-hmm. That is so powerful.
And I just want to jump in and just say, on that thought that you were giving, for people to recognize that all of society is supporting you staying there. So not to have any 100%. Guilt or shame about being there, because all of society is supporting you staying there. But now we get to come together and support each other and getting out of it.
Yeah, right? Because, and even worse, right? Like the society, people that you consider to be in your circle, because in that space you're in is serving them. Right? And they will continue to keep up all the barriers to keep you in that space. And if you find that to be your story, you need to go to Divine Variations. You need to make that connection to begin that conversation and have that assessment so that you can make this journey. You can go from not knowing, uncertainty, fear, into identifying what your purpose is and then how to achieve soul alignment. We have a few minutes left before we have to let you go. One of the things we always talk about, right? Women are always giving of themselves. Each woman that has joined us on this platform has shared their gift. And we recognize that we cannot pour from an empty cup. Tell us how you practice self-care.
Ooh, and this is interesting. I have a self-care and networking fair on May 13th, and I didn't even think about that in this conversation. So I'm having a self-care and networking fair May 13th at Virginia Avenue Park in Santa Monica. So for anyone who's local in Southern California, come on out. Virginia Avenue Park, Santa Monica, May 13th, 2:00. And so for me, I practice self-care in a few different ways. One, having a daily practice when I'm getting up in the morning of connecting to my God self first, right? So that's meditation and reading every morning, regardless of what I have to do, right? So that's the most important self-care. Then I believe in spending time by myself. I need to be able to hear and think without the influence of outside forces, right? And for me, that's critical. For somebody else, like my youngest daughter, she needs time being social more than me, right? So really recognizing what you need and getting it. So for me, getting that alone time, and also knowing that I'm a creative soul. I am highly creative. And if I'm not creating, I'm not going to be moving very well, because there's going to be things that are backed up that need to be expressed. So creative expression is key for my self-care. So those are 3 things in my self-care regimen that are going to be critical in order for me to stay in this flow of energy and having something to give to other people.
Well, thank you for practicing it in a way that allows you to give of yourself to others, as we all learn the importance of soul alignment. Facebook, thank you. Ladies, you have been amazing. Your comments, your questions have really made this conversation even more important, so very rich. And so we're so very grateful to each and every one of you for sharing this hour, the fastest hour of your day, with us. Crystal.
Thank you. I've taken so many notes because what you shared has been encouraging and motivating. And just as you spoke about the 5th-year senior and the GPA, to what you've able to be accomplished in order to pour things back into other people. I mean, it just goes without saying that you recognized and you owned your amazing. I know you have a hard stop. We're going to wrap up some things after you go, but I definitely need you to leave us with the mantra of all mantras, and I will say it first so that you know exactly what it is. I am Crystal Gunn. I am a Black woman, and I own my amazing.
I am Naila Mouid. I am a Black woman, and I own my amazing.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to have you on the show again. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Naila.
Thank you, ladies, for having me. Peace.
Absolutely. Michele Davenport Harper. Bravo. I chuckle because, as always, you did a super awesome job. The comments have been off the chain. I'm excited that we get to do what we do every Sunday and impact and have the impact that we have on people. And I could not, as I always say, I could not think of a better person to share this platform with. And the way you lift up these conversations is absolutely phenomenal. April is Financial Literacy Month. So please, everybody, mark your calendars for next Sunday at 7 p.m., where I will actually be the guest. And I'm wearing my financial strategist hat. So we will be talking about budgeting, credit, and what we should do in light of everything happening economically in the world today. You don't want to miss this discussion. And it's so interesting that we talked about earlier today, living in survival mode. Definitely going to touch on how that impacts us financially as well. So I definitely look forward to that. Michele, go ahead and give us your last remarks so we can close this thing out.
Absolutely. Right. Every single week, Facebook, you have been invited into some amazing conversations. You have been given information that's absolutely priceless. The idea that you got the gift for free. Please take this information, listen to other podcasts that we have done, share with others. There is information, lessons, life-changing moments found in each one of these conversations. And I cannot wait next week that I get to interview my BFF. Christian, I'm so very grateful that you continue to be obedient to the call that God put on your life, to create a platform where Black women get to uplift one another, that we get to hear their dynamic stories, that we get to laugh, we get to cry together, we get to learn together. Each one of us gets better every single time we get to be in your presence. I tell you each week, you continue to impact lives for women that have never even shared physical space. Keep being obedient. Your greater, my friend, is coming. And I'm grateful to sit alongside of you in this space. My name is Michele Harper. I am a Black woman, and I absolutely, without apology, own my amazing.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your nights, and we will see you next Sunday at 7.